Nick, my man, how you doing?
Hey, Record, my brother. Good. How are you? It's late there. It's like 11 o'clock at night, past your
Yeah, it
bedtime.
is. It is. I'm still in Australia here. Like, but tell me, don't I look tan?
No, actually, you don't.
What do you mean? Oh no, this got to be the lighting. I'm really like Ted. I was saying to one of my one member of my team today. He's like, "How's it going?" I said, "Well, I packed three jeans and like three jumpers, and I haven't unpacked them. I haven't used them."
You're just wearing
It's
shorts.
nice. Yeah, it's just shorts every day. Like I was working all week, but in shorts. And sometimes not
That's
even
beautiful.
shoes. So it's a really beautiful. Like it does something to me, like the good weather. And Australians are really friendly people, you know that? Like they're super
Yeah.
friendly. Like for everyone, from the colleagues, the students, the coffee lady, the people at the supermarket checkout, everyone is goddamn friendly. And I think it's because the weather's always so nice. Anyway, so we're enjoying it. My kids are loving it. My wife loves being back. We see lots of old friends on the weekends. So it's a good place. And then I'm visiting my old stomping ground, QT, where I was. It changed a bit, but they do have a big team, lots of ECRs, sorry, like early career researchers. That's what they call them
Yeah.
here. And they all come, and like everybody else on the planet, they're like, yeah, and we want to write good papers. What does it take to get into the top journals? Now, what they define as a top journal, like Monty Deepa said last time, is slightly different. They have slightly different ranking lists, but as always, the top of the crop is always the same wherever you go. And then it varies a little bit, like some ranking list pushes up that journal and so forth. But it's all the same everywhere. Everyone wants to publish, everyone wants to write papers. And everyone's pretty research active, I think. So, it's kind of nice, actually.
Yeah, I found myself talking to some junior folks in our field recently, and there was this idea that it was an anti-intellectual pursuit, this pursuit of papers. It's
Well,
like,
it
oh, a
is,
paper here, a
in a
paper
way.
there. They talk
Yeah.
about the paper, and everybody did, and that's true, except for the fact that a paper is kind of a unit of knowledge. We don't have anything else. All we have is papers. So bottom line is it may not be perfect. It has its ugliness, but it's our unit of incremental knowledge, as we talked about when we talked about books, right? So if you want to contribute to knowledge in the world, you write papers, and that's in every field, right? So, but it does become an end in its own right, which, ideally it's I want to contribute to research, and then papers are a measure of that. Instead, the measure has become the
Yeah, I
goal.
mean, like the yardstick and the metrification is certainly visible also here. Australia is pretty metrified academia. But let's not talk about that again. But I want to make one observation where, like, I literally talked to 30 or 40 students, postdocs, lecturers, like that's what they call assistant professors here. And they tell me, like, many of them have the following formula. Like, they all think of a new concept, basically, and they have really cool concept, like really cool names. They usually have a noun and a qualifier, like
Okay.
revenue resilience or, ambidextrous innovation, whatever, right? So these sorts of words. And then they usually do sort of like they have some cool cases here. Yeah, it's a pretty digital country, so lots of cool digital cases of all sorts of things. And then they all come and say like, and then I take this theory, and like I'm studying this concept and this is my case. And then I bring in, insert name of theory X from random
Yeah.
reference field Y.
Yeah.
And right. So they all
Institutional
literally all,
theory,
yeah, well,
resource-based view,
yeah, look, like this theory from marketing, that theory from psychology, that social theory, all of them do that. So they got this, phenomenon meets case, and then theory is important, right? So they all bring in the theory, which made me think of this old debate we had, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago about theory adaptation and theory borrowing, and that IS relies too much on reference theories. And I noticed this, I think, because I haven't heard that like that in a while, like this. And then I bring in theory X. I'm not
hmm
doing anything with theory X, but I'm using it.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of this conversation that we had in the field that it was, like a dominant model. I think a dominant script they called it, and I was thinking to myself, well, it's not anymore. You agree? Like we don't do that as much as we used to.
So you're talking about the Grover and Littinen paper, 2015, the new state of play in information systems.
The
And
push to
actually,
the
someone
edges,
sent,
right? The push
yeah,
to the
push to
edges.
the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Or wait, which one is it?
No, it's called the push to the edges, right? The prevalence of
Yeah,
what they
push to
call
the edges. The new
the
state of
mid-range
play.
script. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called the new state of play in information systems research, push to the edges. Right. And they had this idea of a mid-range script. And I think that script that they were referring to is kind of what you're saying. If you go back, and I guess TAM is the classic model of this, or the trust stuff. It's hey, here's received wisdom, theory of planned behavior or whatever, theory of reasoned action. And
Yeah.
based on that, we have these constructs, this outcome, and based on that, we generate these hypotheses, and then we test it with some sort of an experiment, or there were a lot of surveys, organizational surveys back in the day that they were writing to. And they're basically saying in that paper that for behavioral theory, for behavioral research, that's the script. And, when you're doing quantitative behavioral research, that's the script. And that script is, and they were basically saying, pretty limiting, right? It's fine, but it shouldn't be the only thing we do in IS research.
I think that second part is a little bit more accurate, right? They said they said this mid-range script is extremely prevalent, and they did an analysis of, I can't remember, 100, 150 papers, and showing it's literally in 80% of the papers. So it's very prevalent. It is the most dominant script. And they didn't say the script is necessarily bad. It has a lot of advantages, like cognitive advantages, like you always know what you're gonna get. And that means you quicker can get to the new ideas in a paper and assess them because everything else you're already familiar with. And but of course it's limiting, and everyone is only doing that.
Well, keep in mind when they did their little review, they
Yeah.
excluded, anything that wasn't a behavioral research. Like they excluded design science, and
Well,
they
what do you
excluded.
mean
They
excluded?
have
I
a
mean, like
footnote in that paper
oh, they did? Like, because I was
where they
thinking
said we looked
it,
at all these papers, but we're excluding things like, method work, atheoreta, and design science work, right? So they're basically
okay,
just
fair
looking
enough.
at behavioral
That's kind
research.
of like a little bit cheating, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
you
I
look for the
think.
script in a particular genre and guess what you'll find. But I was thinking, look, it got published in 2015. And it takes, a year to get published. I think it got accepted. They probably worked on it for 3 years. So really the analysis was in what, 2010? Right. So
Yeah.
they looked at the work in the early 2000s is what I'm saying. And I would say at that age, that was a prevalent model and everyone would agree it was always the same. Let's be honest. Like there was still hundreds of TAM papers, TTF, trust, they all followed this model. Take theory from here and either just straight up applied or what they call like somehow adapted. So you don't call it attitude, you call it editor towards computers or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then, measure it, test it, and guess what? You were right. So
yeah.
that was the script. And like, so my big question to you is like, when I look at the research over the last 10 to 15 years, it's not as prevalent
No, that's not
anymore,
the script.
or
There's a new
I'm just,
script.
is there?
No. So two things happened. One is 2010 to 2012, right? That was the era of big data. So although they published this in 2015, they didn't spot the new script that was emerging, which is, ooh, you mean I don't have to go survey
Yeah,
people in an organization? I could just grab data that meets some criteria of a nice field, econometric, use econometric analysis to do a field study. And yeah, I think what happened with big data as data became available to all of us is we moved to another script, right? Diff and diff. If you got the panel data, you propensity score matching. There's this idea of the econometric field study, essentially, or A/B testing, right? Those things really became the prevalent, and they eliminated the script. So it's like we didn't even have to. Now, granted, that wasn't necessarily behavioral work, but the people who were quantitatively minded kind of moved from the behavioral survey script. They just shifted right over to the econometric field study.
Is that true? I'm not sure that's true, Nick. I mean,
Is
I
it?
see what you're saying. Like, there's certainly the emergence of new scripts, the econometric one that you talk about, and the one where we just scrape like a million comments off Reddit and that's my data set, that is certainly one thing that happened. So what I would question is like, first of all, that is not the replacement of a script. That is one out of several scripts. There's also the qualitative script, the one with the, here's my case study and here's my Gioia, and it's always three
Yeah.
mechanisms, never two,
And here
never
are my
four. It's
three
always
processes. Yeah.
exactly, always, but right. Then there's also a design science script emerged, like even two, right? The European one with the design principles and the, whatever, and then the sort of Ahmed Abbasi kind of like the other type of script. They're
Testing.
pretty scripted. So I think all of these scripts emerged, not just one. A and B, Nick. I don't think anyone moved. Do you know a behavioral person that became an econometric person? No, it's just
Sure.
different. It's different people. Like name one.
Well, Paul Pavlov.
Okay.
His
Did he?
dissertation was
Yeah,
and I
survey
bet you
based.
if I were to think about it, but he did survey based, and then he did some stuff on trust, and then he totally pivoted, and he's most of his work in the last decade is econometrics. So that's just
Okay,
one.
fair
By
enough.
the way, who's the best dresser in the field of information systems?
It's got to
I
be
just
Paul.
I
It's
just
got to be
visited
Paul.
Miami.
Oh, you
Dude, the
did?
guy is tailored. He has beautiful shoes. And he wears clothes. So Miami has these unfortunate colors of like
Orange.
orange and
Yeah.
green and but he'll wear the green and he'll have his tailored suit with the tie and he pulls it off. He looks good.
I only see him on LinkedIn, and I like always say like this is the only guy that I know that can totally pull off an orange suit, like an all orange
Yeah.
suit. It looks
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got
Yeah.
he's got style, that
Dude,
dude.
the guy's
Yeah.
a dean, and he's been a dean at before in Miami. He was at Houston. I looked at his record while I was there because we
Oh,
were
he's a
talking about it.
machine. He's a machine. Yeah.
He's been a dean for the last decade. He's published as much as anybody else. He's probably got
Oh
like
yeah.
five A hits in the last couple of years, right? So yeah.
Yeah, not only that, but he's been doing this for 20 years. He left it like look at his impact. Like he has, I don't know, 50,000 citations as well. So yeah, he did a lot of things. I don't know him personally, but yeah, I've seen his orange suits. They kind of, jump out at you.
Well, but so that's one, and I'm sure I could come up with a handful of others as well. I think there's a group of folks who are kind of quantitatively minded that did move from the behavioral script to the econometric script, so, right? So, but I think you're right. But so they're arguing against the idea of a script. But what do you think? What's wrong with the script? I kind of
No,
like the idea. It's like
oh,
the classic script is an experiment.
oh yeah.
You have a hypothesis, you subject it to a strict test, and then you test that's science, right? Wouldn't all science be
Oh
scripted?
yeah. So first of all, I think there's a lot of advantages to the script. And in fact, like in the early 2000s, I did survey behavioral kind of work, individual level behavioral psychology type work. And I will tell you this, like it was way easier to write these papers because they all followed the same script. And
Yeah.
I find that papers now they're much more difficult to write. I don't know, like it's just my personal impression. So number one, and it's like they're not arguing against the script, they're arguing against the dominance of a single script. Because if
Yeah.
everyone's doing this, then by definition, you're not allowing other types of knowledge productions or knowledge representation schemes to emerge. And that was, I think, the key point. And I will say this point was probably valid in when they did the analysis, looking backwards. It was a little bit outdated already in 2015 when the paper came out. That's not their fault. And it's kind of mute now. I don't think we have a problem of a dominant script. We have a range. We have lots of scripts. Some are more dominant than others, sure. But yeah, so we have scripts, and it's good that we have scripts because they tell
Yeah,
us
but
how
I'll
to
tell you
how to
this.
package up
Yeah.
things.
So we're on the same page, but I'll tell you this record. Look at the end of that paper. The paper's all about the script and the dominant script. But then when you get at their, what I would interpret as their real agenda, which is you look at the end and it's like, okay, what's the problem with the script? And they give some ideas. They say inadequate diversity in theorizing,
Which
inadequate
is true,
treatment of the IT artifact,
which is also
inadequate
true.
freedom in theory and empirics. So what they're doing is they're actually setting up something they wrote a couple of years ago in JIT, and you and I responded to it, right, in JIT in different articles. But they had this paper, 2023 in Journal of Information Technology, The Pursuit of Innovative Theory in the Digital Age. And I think
Yeah.
this is what they're shooting for. They're like, we can't just write another TAM or trust paper. We can't just write like another, we need interesting new theory that really focuses on the IT artifact. Digital technologies are the thing of our era. And yet our theories are still imported from other places, institutional theory, theory of plane. It's come on, we should have theories, right? That's what they were arguing.
Yeah, and I fully agree with them. I'm just saying, like now in 2025, it's like, well, this challenge is passed, and a new challenge emerged. Like the paper that they talk about, the theorizing digital age. Sure, we need more innovative theory. It should be our own. We shouldn't just, borrow, adopt, and instantiate theories from somewhere else because the digital is everywhere. We should think about the digital. I agree on that count. But of course, it creates new problems. If that is not a new script, then we will have a problem because we're flooding the place with new theories. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
because then it's the opposite problem. If it's only one script, then we're limiting the diversity. If diversity is the script, then we have no cumulative tradition anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, the cumulative tradition, because I guess what they're saying is, look, if you're so married to the cumulative tradition, you're not going to do new and interesting work. However, I wonder. So there's a couple of things. Uh, they use this and the received theory or whatever they call it reference theory. It's
Yeah.
theory from outside of the field of information systems, and it's like if we're just treating these reference theories as I forget what
Immutable,
they
they call
call it.
it. Immutable
All right.
as a
Oh,
like an
immutable
untouchable.
mobiles.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're using the old ant idea of something that when you move it from place to place, it doesn't change, right? It's immutable. It carries its meaning. So we're taking these immutable mobiles, we're reference theory, and we're saying it must hold, and we're taking it as like this unassailable wisdom, and then we of course apply it, right? That's what they're saying. The flip side is to ignore existing, and this is your problem with the cumulative tradition, right? If we just ignore existing theory, then what are we doing? We risk recreating it because in the end, it's all about humans. It's all about organizations. If we don't pay attention to that reference theory, probably the reference theory is probably pretty good most of the time, isn't it?
Well, so I think reference theories have gotten a bad rap, maybe because of this papers such as this, where we all said, "Oh, you're just using a reference theory." If that's a bad thing. Now, I would agree with them that if you treat it as a holy cow, like an artifact that must not be touched, it must not be altered, it dare not be challenged. Well, then it's kind of pointless, really. I mean, but if you think about it, we are a socio-technical field, which to me always has been a subset of the social science. Like we are dealing when you like humans and collectives of humans and groups of humans also deal with technology artifact, which is a subset of the things that humans do, right? So it's always got to be a part of that. Like organization change because of IT, but they also change for other reasons, right? So all IT-driven change, in a way, is only a subset of all sorts of change. So that to me, that always means like, well, reference theories that go beyond that have existed for a long time. They stand there for a reason. Now, I
Yeah.
should start with them, and then I should take this new phenomenon, this digital or now the AI thing or whatever, and problematize and see like what's different, what's different. Now, I shouldn't discard the old thing. I shouldn't take it as an immutable object either. I should start with this and then start, taking it apart, placing it together, replacing things, substituting things, and so forth. But it's definitely the starting point. But you got to work on that. It's got to be mold, not an immutable object. You know what I mean? That would be my position.
All right. So we've got Recker's rule about reference theory. It seems like, on the one hand, if you treat reference theory as a sacred cow, as this received wisdom that it's never wrong, and we just apply it, well, that's lame because then we're not
Yeah.
doing any new theorizing. But if we ignore reference theory totally, we risk, essentially reproducing it in different terms or
Well,
that sort
that's
of thing.
that's that's the point of your paper, your response, right? This is
Right.
the like you run into clickbait theorizing, then everything is new, and that is a risk. The risk that I see is, let's say we do all of that and we ignore the cumulative tradition, and everyone gets to write their own paper. Well, at some stage we end up with 2,712 new theories. At some stage
Yeah.
we'll have to sort them out. Right. So which
Yeah.
is delaying actual scientific homework, which is to figure out which of these assumptions are worth carrying forward, which of them should be set aside. This is also part of the knowledge
Yeah.
tradition, not just adding stuff on top,
So
but also
so this
parsing off the
is
old
yeah.
stuff. And that
Yeah,
gets
so
just
this is
more
Recker's
difficult if you
rule.
allow for more theories. Yeah.
So we're getting to Recker's rule. On the one, and I'm setting it up. So on the one hand, you have just using received reference theory as a sacred cow. You don't like that because you need to problematize and adapt it to make it current with things that are happening. On the other hand, you have this, well, let's just ignore reference theory and chase new phenomena, this phenomenon-driven theorizing where we use new phenomena as an excuse and say it's new, it's AI, it's blockchain, it's LLMs. We've never had these before, therefore anything I'm going to study is new. And that doesn't work because everybody, we recreate. So there's something in the middle. And this is where the rule that you're making is it's if you're going to say something, since socio-technical research is a subset of social science, we need to take some sort of social science theoretical perspective, whether it's social theory, psychological theory, behavioral econ, whatever it is. You need to take the appropriate perspective, apply it to the phenomenon, problematize how this new phenomenon might be different or might change, and then we do our research. So you problematize the theory with the phenomenon, is what you're
Yes,
saying.
that's what I'm saying. And I think then the emphasis shifts from what's new here, AI is new. That's not the point. It always shifts it to what is the same and what is different.
Right.
In the world now with AI, what is the same as in the old world where it had theory X, Y, and Z that could cover what was happening then? But what is different now? Not
All right. So
necessarily
what
what
is
it
the
used.
same? Work with me. What is the same with AI right now that with every other IT? I'll give you a couple ideas. One is
I'll give you a
decision
couple
making.
of ones. Yeah. Okay.
Decision making. All right. They say, well, and I've seen this in papers where it's like, well, now, algorithms are making decisions. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think algorithms, depending on how you define them, have been making decisions for quite some time. There's a whole literature on decision support systems in the 1990s, right? We have decision aids in the terms of some sort of technology, some sort of software for decades now, right?
I was at the University of Sydney. I'll give you a second one. I was at the University of Sydney and I talked about, developing AI stuff, etc. And I said, look, one of the things that's different is they learn. And immediately one of the guys shut his hand. I was like, actually, it's not. Like they don't actually learn. Like so, they learn in the sense that every now and then you have a new release, let's say of ChatGPT, and that one has learned something in comparison to version
Yeah,
3.4 from October or whatever. But it's not that
yeah,
it's learning constantly. So there again, you can go and say, like, is it really learning? Is that really what's different? Because SAP 3 and SAP 3.5, also learned in between version. In a way, it's just version management like we've seen, plenty of times before. It's like when you get a
yeah,
new app update. So I like that because it challenged me to say, like, is that really what's new here? Is that even what's
yeah,
different? Right? It looks like
yeah.
that, but at the core of it, maybe it's not.
And then we had in our paper, of course, learning was one of the things. The other two were autonomy and inscrutability. But since then, of course, I've talked to people, autonomy. Well, automation. The automation is essentially autonomy in the sense. Now,
Yeah.
there's some differences, but we've been automating things forever. And, the question is with these new types of autonomous agents, whatever they may be, how is it really different than just automating maybe a broader set of things? That's one. And I have some answers to that, but I think it's an interesting question, right?
Well, the next one, I'll give you one more because I've been thinking about the same thing as well. Like, what is really different, right? It's a very, like, I think we did a reasonably good job in our matching, to be honest, in thinking about stuff that might be different, like autonomy and learning and scrutability. But, it does get, when you apply them, it gets a little bit iffy. Like the inscrutability, well, what exactly is different? Like, oh, yeah,
Yeah,
anyway.
SAP
So,
is inscrutable to
yeah,
people
very, very
sometimes.
much.
Yeah,
Exactly, right? So,
yeah,
so it's not that this is a new thing. Technology was very much inscrutable for a lot. You can't look behind the YouTube recommendation algorithm either. So I'll give you one that was in the in Fabrizio Dell'Acqua's and Ethan Mollick's and Gila's paper, and they said, well, it's the naturalistic interface, and I was like, well, there's something to that. Like, my mother can talk to the thing. She can barely send a WhatsApp, right? So, but she can talk. She doesn't, but she could, right? So the interface and the type of natural conversational stuff, maybe that's different because you really don't need any skills. You don't even need like even input devices of a normal sort
Right. But
anymore.
what you're talking
Maybe.
about is a very specific thing, which is an LLM. And
Sure.
then it's
Yeah, I
like,
was,
well, we're
yeah.
not actually talking about AI, are we? We're talking about a very particular LLM and its free text interface and all of that. And then you mentioned the YouTube algorithm. Well, that actually is learning. And
Yeah,
behind the
that is
scenes,
true. That
real
is learning.
time,
Yeah.
it actually is learning. So the issue that we're running into here is not that, somehow all new AI inherits all possibilities for, I think it's one of these things where these are some general areas where a particular artifact, whether it's LLM or whether it's YouTube's reinforcement learning, algorithm, I would call both of those AI, but they're different animals, and you want to
Yeah.
conceptualize the difference for that particular animal. What does it inherit from previous technologies that's the same? And what is the particular thing? And in this case, maybe it's the inscrutability for the YouTube, for the natural interface for the LLM. But the point is, then you conceptualize that difference, and then you theorize the difference, right? Either inductively or
Yeah, I
hypothetically.
like that. And I do think that in this day and age, is that the idea of this phenomenon driven or phenomenon based problematization? Like the idea of that you take a theory, but then you take an actual empirical phenomenon to problematize the assumption of the theory, right? So I
Yeah.
do think
So
that
my
particular
yeah,
approach is quite valuable at the moment. You could do this. You could say
yeah,
like, well, this theory says this, but here I have this case, here I have this data, here I have this technology or this organ, whatever, and it's kind of different. And then, of course, your job is to say why that is a puzzling observation. You can't just claim that. You have to give a very good reason. Like, this is puzzling for a reason. This is challenging the assumption in a particular way and not just like, oh, it's a new case, right? So, and the onus, I think, is on us, on the authors, on the researchers. But I think that strategy, if and when you have cases that actually are puzzling because they do challenge received wisdom, that's the discovery we need to make. We need to find these puzzling observations because they challenge us to take received wisdom and saying, I don't know quite know what it is, but something's different here. And then you obviously, engage in the process and figuring out what it is. And then you can
yeah,
update. And then we get your point, which is that is how you update the cumulative tradition. You say, this bit is still good. This one needs updating. This part we can, set aside as an old idea. And if we do this iteratively, continuously, by the way, paper by paper by paper by paper, very incrementally, that's how you move knowledge forward. Right. And you can
yeah.
take this quite literally. You could go to diffusion of innovation, good old Rogers, right? And so like, okay, what are his five things? What's the S curve? What are the seven mechanisms that he talked about in 1953? Which of them are different or which of them are not? And then one by
Yeah.
one, you can update the boxes, or you can figure out that the
Right.
boxes are still the same. It's still the same process, which is kind of like my base position. It's the same thing, it's just a little bit faster. Anyway.
Yeah, well, it could be. But yeah, so I think we're on the same page with your rules for how to think about this. You mentioned that this whole phenomenon-based theorizing. And I think that's not only popular in our field with folks like you
Robert.
know, when he was on our podcast, Robert Gregory. But they're doing it out in management as well because management has discovered that, AI and technology matter to the world. So they want phenomenon-driven theorizing. And I think when you read what Robert and others have written about it, particularly these more recent paper, they talk about making sure you problematize existing theory and engage with existing theory. The thing that gets me though is and same with Kale and Varun with their let's have new theories. They're not saying ignore existing theory. They're saying let's figure out ways that it's different. So the substance of what they say is aligned with what Recker's rule is. However, what happens is people then use, and this is what we wrote our comments at, they use the idea, oh, I'm doing phenomenon-based theory, or I'm doing so I don't have to read. I'm just going to go out. This is totally new. And it's kind of a lazy way of because it's hard to steel man existing literature, take all of your findings off the table because other research has already found them, and then focus only on the difference that you're actually adding to the table. So that's my problem is people will use this as an excuse to not do their work.
Yeah. And like 2 points. I mean, on the one hand, very pragmatic, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. And that is the danger of every script, every guidance, every template kind of paper, everything that all these papers that legitimize a particular way of doing things or some alternative way of doing things, then people use that as a shortcut excuse. That's just what happens. I'm not sure whether they're lazy or not, but that always happens. Now, does that mean we shouldn't give these types of legitimization advice? No, of course not, right? It says like, please read carefully. By the way, it's the same with phenomenon-based theorizing. Now, when you read that carefully, it actually says, it doesn't say start with a phenomenon, theorize about it. That's not at all what it says. It says take theory, but problematize it through a phenomenon, a real phenomenon, not through logic, not through whatever, right? So through the phenomenon, most people read it as like, oh, I have a phenomenon, I want to write theory about it, so I'm doing phenomenon-based theorizing, right? So it's the same sort of lazy, I get what you call the lazy application. That danger always exists. And can't stop it, I guess, can't help it. What I do like in this paper by Varun, so I agree with your response, and I think you had some very nice anchor. I think you call them anchors, right? Strategies,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
like them. I didn't quite get all of them because you write so complicated, but
Oh, come on. Uh, so, I mean, the one is basically your rule. It's the Recker rule.
okay,
We call it the problematization anchor. It's problematizing existing theory with new phenomenon, where
okay, that's
you
the same thing. Yeah,
everything, right? The other one is the implications anchor, right? Which is, well, what does it matter?
okay,
What if so let's say we don't really know what's happening in a particular situation, but it matters to the world in some way. Well, then let's go ahead and make it a theoretical contribution, and the practical implications are the thing that matter to it. And then the last one is this boundary spanning anchor, and that's contributing out to the. So that's basically exporting, right? Take something we know in IS, like you're doing with the entrepreneurship, right? And take it to entrepreneurship. And it might not be that new for an IS researcher, but to the entrepreneurship conversation, maybe they haven't seen this kind of thinking about the technology. Right?
so the
So,
implications anchor, is that the one where you say like, look, you might be right and there's something different. And it might be right that we have, that we have a slight, like that we have a new theory about it. But there's no difference in the so what. Like the implication of all of this, we
well,
can
no,
continue doing what we're
this.
doing.
So when we wrote that section, and at the end, I think we cited Carolina's paper, but it's about, okay, so there's social bots,
Yeah.
and she looked at social movements. She looked at a social movement in Brazil. This is Carolina Salge, right? So she
Yeah, I
has
remember
the
that paper. Yeah.
bots. She looked at the social movements in Brazil and in the Middle East. And as she was looking at them, she was using social theory, right? Social movements theory. And she realized, wait a second, a bunch of these people in these social movements are bots. As a matter of fact, bots are doing most things. As a matter of fact, it's all bots. So did her first paper in the Academy of Management Discoveries, there was no real theory. But it was really damn cool, right? She's like, look, all these theories you have, all this research you've been doing on social movements, and all these what central actors doing. What if it's bots? All of a sudden, all your theories don't hold, right? So she didn't, with that paper, generate a theory per se, but she did say some important stuff that should be published. And this
I
aligns
agree.
with my idea that we should publish patterns, which I've written
And
about
by
more
the way,
recently.
it also aligns with something that Varun and Keil wrote about in the paper. It's like, I think they call it the barriers that impede, new theory development. And one of the ones they picked is like, we have this tendency not to publish descriptive papers. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think we should because,
Heck yeah.
like her AMD paper, at the moment, I like the Information Systems Journal. They have this practitioner paper category, which is
Yeah.
an ill-fitting name because it's a peer-reviewed paper. Like we always have SEAE 3-4 rounds, but these are purely descriptive case studies, and I love them because I think this is an interesting case. Look at what's different here, etc., and so forth. And by publishing that, other people can now go and wonder, and they can
Yeah.
think about the
But it better
puzzle
be
and
a cool
solve it.
thing. It
Yeah,
better be a cool thing
sure,
like
sure. Why
Carolina's
not?
bot or like your autism thing, which is
Yeah, the
which is
autism thing,
somebody
right? So
can,
that's a nice example. That's a cool different kind of
Yeah.
story. And now someone else can go and theorize about it because we thought, like Olga and I, we thought about it. And the reality is, frankly, at some stage we said, like, I don't know. I don't know. Don't have a good theoretical angle. I don't see the big problem. So, and then we decided, let's write this ISJ paper because we can't get this published in the MySQL. So we didn't even try,
Huh.
seriously, right? So we
Yeah.
said, why don't we, like, it's still a cool case. And that stuff should also be published and it should be, valued as such. It's good science.
Yeah, but think about it. Well, first of all, I think it's funny that ISJ is about for practitioners and no practitioner has
Yeah,
ever read it.
sure.
And
Oh,
then,
yeah, I'm with
right.
you. I've said this multiple times. Yeah, of course.
But whether it's Carolina's paper or your paper, think about what is published there. It's something cool. So that's the problem. If you're going to take this implications lens, it's got to be cool. And then I'm like,
Gotta be cool.
okay, go ahead and tell us what's cool about the phenomenon. And if you do a good job with the interesting research and it has implications for existing theory, then it's like, okay, cool. I like that. Even if you don't have your own theory, we can go with that. Uh, but yeah, the problem is if all I do, and this is my problem with some of those catchword articles. Now, some of the catchword articles in Biza are very good, including the one I wrote with Stefan and Tommy, right? Of
Of
course, it's
course,
very
yours is
good.
good.
Uh, on
Wait, it's about
surveillance,
surveillance, right?
it's
Surveillance
kind of a
something. Yeah.
review. Yeah, it's kind of a review, but there are a couple of ideas in there. But the problem is if catchword becomes buzzword, right? Instead of a catchword article where you're actually addressing the research, maybe reviewing the research on a particular important current topic, which is how I interpret it, it becomes ooh, I want to be the first person to publish this buzzword, new buzzwords out now. Then it's like,
Yeah, I
all right,
agree.
no real depth to this. And it's like that first paper on LLMs, that horrible paper that all the most famous people in our field wrote in the International
Oh yeah,
Journal
yeah.
and
The IGN
where
paper. Yeah,
where
with
everybody
4,000
has like a
authors.
little paragraph and like
Yeah,
all these famous people put a paragraph together and they just patched it together. And now that paper has like a million citations.
yeah,
It's
it
the
literally
worst written
is. Yeah.
paper ever.
The worst.
Read
It's
it.
not the worst. I've read it. Let's be honest, it's pretty bad. Anyway, hey, so I
Wait,
like,
are we going to delete that from our podcast? Or are we going to keep,
well,
we just
I'll believe
insulted
it.
half the people in
Bleep.
our field.
Yeah, half the people, all the editors, by the way. So I like the way I fully agree with you, and I like the way Varun and Kala also wrote about it. Just in passing, I think they could have made more of it. They said something like, "It must be a puzzling observation." Right. And I think that's what you mean. Like you said, it's got to be cool. I like this qualifier puzzling because this puts the
Puzzling.
onus on, yeah, you're right. So it's got to be something that is different, that's not immediately obvious, that's not trivial. That's, in your words, it's got to be cool. And showing that, claiming that, and therefore, being able to publish it as a case or doing whatever with it, that's the challenge. That's the onus on the researcher. You want to do any of this? Go and give me a puzzling observation. No, no, no. It's got to be cool. You got to do that, right? So give me that, and then I'm listening, right? But if not, if it's just yet another case of some platform doing something, or as you said, like yet another buzzword, that's not puzzling at all. If it's the same as ever, like it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
great. It's a case of someone with an app. That's no puzzle.
Yeah.
It's not cool.
Now,
It's not interesting. It's nothing.
Now that's for the really good stuff. The bottom line is this, record. Most of our work is going to be relatively mediocre, where we just grab an idea, come up with a little construct or something, add it to that idea, and move on with our data.
And that's my
So
big
not
problem with
but I
the
guess this is what we aspire to, right? Maybe not every paper hits it, but it's what we aspire to with our
well,
paper.
and that is why I always think that first of all, not every paper has to be submitted to an A-star journal because
Yeah.
like most of the time, like I'm not doing A-star level work all the time. I'm doing solid research with various
As a matter
people.
of fact, some
And
people say you never do A-star level research. I'm not me. I think other people have said that.
well, yeah, a good thing my ego is big enough that I just said that I do, and like half of the field people that wrote a paper with 4,000 citations don't. So no, but no. The point I was making is that I sometimes find it a pity when people do work that is good and solid and in fact should be published, and then they don't because they don't get the bonus, like the A-star points that they need or think they need for the career or whatever else. So they literally don't continue to work on that because they think the payoff isn't good
Yeah.
enough. right?
Yeah.
Whereas like I do write like so I'm sorry, but I do write these ISJ papers with Olga. So I think that's good stuff and it should be published. And no, we never some it's this is not a failed ISR paper. You know, we went straight to ISJ and it's like that's a nice little paper. And by the way, it's still a couple of years of work and three revisions and whatever
Oh
else.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
the same
exactly.
stuff. And I think that's exactly what we should be doing. And whenever I have a good idea, which rarely happens, then I'll try to get that into the God knows whatever journals. But that
Yeah,
doesn't stop me from doing these types of things.
yeah. All right, so that's not BVB in the background behind you there,
It
that
is.
jersey
It
number
is.
11. It is. That's my
There's
team.
my friend here. He's the biggest Dortmund fan, Borussia Dortmund fan, and this is a signed jersey of Marco Reus. And if
Huh.
you're a Dortmund fan, you should know who that is. Yeah, that
I'm a
he gave
Dortmund
his
fan, but I
son.
don't know any of these people's names. I
Well,
know that
this is a legend.
I was in the yellow
Marco
wall and
with
with
me,
you.
by the way, when I didn't care, I was cheering for. Oh, in fact, I was cheering for Stuttgart.
No, you were. You had a BVB scarf
Only
on,
because
as
he
they
gave it
call
to me because I was literally the only person in that yellow wall that wasn't at all yellow.
it. So that's just by default my team. That was a very fun day. All right, Wrecker. What else? What did we decide? What did we decide today? We decided number one that you think you could publish A-star level work.
And
Uh,
apparently no one else
and
does.
but yeah, and then but beyond that, I think you did. You're hitting. I mean, it's the hard thing to do. You have to read, you have to understand the reference theory, and you have to do the hard problematization to say what's different. If you get there, and I love your idea of puzzles, and if you get there, you can have some original research. If you don't, you might still get published, but that's the gold standard, right?
And maybe just one little addition, just because I happen, as I said, I started with saying having these conversations here with all these young scholars who are just as ambitious as everybody else, and they're motivated and they have great ideas, but all of them start with a case and then look for theories. And I would say now flip that, like start on the assumption that we know something already, and
Yeah.
then go and use your case to figure out what's different. Don't just go straight to the case. And that to me is even a realization that because let's be honest, I think like a couple of years ago, I said on this podcast, like, that's what I'm doing as well. I start with a case. The first thing we do is we always go into the case
Yeah.
and, talk to
Yeah.
some people. But now I'm sort of changing my mind. It's like, no, you want to start with a theory and then use the case to figure out what is different, what is the puzzle, and slowly but surely take it from there. Now that still can still mean that after a couple of weeks, you go in and do your initial interviews. And that's not what I'm saying, but your paper and your ideas and your thinking shouldn't start with the case. It
Yeah.
should
No,
start
I
with
agree.
what we know.
I agree. All right, my brother. Good.
That's enough for now. That's enough for now. And next time we speak, I think
Huh.
I'll be back in Europe. So that'll make it easier for
Yeah.
the time zone difference because you're early morning and I'm really
Yeah.
late at night.
All right. We'll go
What,
to
what
bed,
day
my
is it for
brother.
you? Yeah.
What day is it? It's
Yeah. It's Monday
it's
for
Monday.
you? Okay. So
Yeah.
it's at least the same day. All right.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Talk to you next time.
All right. See you.